Welcome back from that short break. It is a Connect Chat Let's Talk Business with Mr. Daniel Steinman. We are talking about the changes that will be happening in our legislative system. That is, of course, the Income Tax Act, but also, Mr. Daniel Steinman, let's just quickly go into the bracket creeping.
What?
What is that? Our listeners don't know what it is.
Let's
so some
ask
of them.
the listeners to call in and tell us what is bracket creeping. It's a weird concept. It comes from the American fiscus. Must I explain the meaning of the word fiscus?
We've had that discussion too many times, I'm sure.
It many times.
Yeah.
Okay, the government side of the economy is what you call the fiscus.
Yeah.
That's why they talk about fiscal income, fiscal this, fiscal that. It all refers to the money that is controlled by the government.
Yeah.
So the Income Tax Act is arguably the most important piece of legislation for the functioning of the government, because it determines the income of the government, and it determines, very importantly, which part of your and my income we have to forfeit. You must go to the government in the form of PAYE, pay as you earn, the tax that you pay every month or that your employer pays every month to NAMRA, the tax authority, and for which you get a RP5. You should get them now. That sort of reconciliation of the tax that you've paid during the year.
Yeah.
And just as an aside, Elsabe, I always cringe when I see that some people, the tax that they pay is more than the salary that I get.
Yeah, it is.
It's unbelievable. But let's get back to the point under discussion, and that is bracket creeping. So there's a whole host. There's about 7 adjustments that is proposed in the amendment bill. So the official name is the Income Tax Amendment Bill. And it is amending the Income Tax of 1981, which from the date you can see is pre-independence legislation. So what we've said in the first part of our talk is that this is a slow process, and because of the vast body of legislation, it's basically only change on a convenience basis. Like I said, after independence, it was priorities. Get rid of the discriminatory laws. Now it is as it becomes necessary to change that act. But bracket creeping refers to inflation. So let's make it very simple. The first $50,000 that you earn in a year is tax-free. The taxable amount is 0%. And then the next, I think up to about from I'm under correction here, but I think it's to about $72,000 in a year. The next bracket is 17%. And then the bracket after that is 24%. And then now you are at about 250,000 income in a year. And then when you go to 300,000 or more, that goes up to 31%, and according to current legislation, it is still 33%, the so-called super tax bracket. Now, I'm not nearly near 33%, and I'm very glad that I don't pay 33% of my income to the government, because it means that a third of what I earn
salary,
just goes to them. But honestly, I'm not exaggerating if I tell you I get tears in my eyes when I see the tax that some people pay. So with inflation, everything goes up slowly, incrementally. Let's say by an average rate of somewhere between 3 and 6% per annum. But after 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 years, all those annual increments, they add up. So after a while, if 10 years ago it was a big concession to zero rate the first 50,000 income per year, so you don't pay any tax on it. But now it has become a bit of a, I wouldn't say a joke entirely, but for many people who earn a salary, they are all in the bracket of 150 to 250,000 a year, and there are many people in the bracket 300,000 to 400,000 a year, and it's no big deal anymore. It's not a super income anymore. You know, it used to be 10 years ago. If you earned 400,000 10 years ago, it was fantastic. You know, but many people are approaching that. So this is what that bracket in which you fall that determines the tax that is levied on your income. That grows all the time.
Yeah.
So now you go into, through inflation, you get increments every now and then, and it goes up. And after 10 years, if you look back, you are at the point where 10 years ago you only pay 17%, but now you've been pushed 2 brackets higher. Now suddenly you pay 27%. You know, immediately indicating that if the income is adjusted for inflation, the tax must also be adjusted for inflation. And that is what bracket creeping means. It means that slow annual creep in income, slowly accumulating increments, pushes you into a higher bracket. Now you pay more tax, but your effective spending power has not increased.
Okay.
In fact, it has come down. It has decreased. And this is the most important adjustment in the income tax amendment bill, is to raise all those brackets, to make them higher, substantially higher. For the zero rated, is to double it basically. The zero rated level, double it from 50,000 to 100,000, and move up all the other brackets accordingly. And also there are provisions in the amendments for certain companies, certain tax, companies tax, and for mining tax. There's a whole host of adjustments that are going to take place. But I think 99% of our listeners will be glad to hear that the minimum threshold for not paying any tax is going to double, is increasing very significantly. So you can actually now earn not a substantial income, but a fairly decent salary, and your tax would be close to zero. And you would, I think, only from about 100,000 income would you start paying 17%, whereas in the past it was 50%. But can you see from the values that I mentioned, it is a very significant adjustment. It is very much to your and my benefit. And it's very much the result of an election year.
Well, looking at that, Mr. Daniel Steyn, with Namibia, you know, we've seen a rise in employees going on strike because of increments not given to them. So I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing that they will remain in a certain bracket of not paying tax for the next 5 years.
Crisis. It's a crisis. You know,
it is. But how does that benefit the government? How will the government navigate this if a lot of people don't pay tax? Because at the end of the day, the government does actually rely on taxpayers' money.
It's a very valid question. We'll come back to that now.
After the break.